everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Future Focused CXOs. Today, we are going to sit down with a leader who is shaping what next in business technology and transformation. My guest today is Willem Hendrickx. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of VectraAI, a company that is redefining how enterprises detect and respond to cybersecurity threats using AI-driven security. He will get more into that. But William himself brings in decades of leadership experience across some of the world's most influential tech companies and has also built a reputation of driving growth at scale with keeping customers at the core. So in today's conversation, we are really going to dive into how William approaches revenue transformation in the age of AI, what it takes to align sales, marketing, and customer service as one growth strategy, and why cybersecurity is now a go-to-market issue and not an IT issue alone. So without any further delay, let me welcome William to the podcast. William, welcome to our podcast.
Jay, welcome. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Willem Hendrickx. I'm actually Chief Revenue Officer for VectraAI. I'm actually in between Belgium and San Jose. I'm actually born and raised in Belgium, but of course, since my headquarters is in California, I'm spending most of my time in San Jose, California. And as I said, it's a pleasure for me to be here, guys.
Hey, I want to jump right in. When I looked over your journey from local sales role into global leadership, it's really not a straight line. And we love that here, but we also want to share that. So as you were moving up the ranks towards the CRO, can you give us a defining moment that sort of helped you make the leap, either personally or professionally, that helped change the trajectory of your career?
Yeah, I guess looking back, I think there's probably two moments that define that. I mean, you go back 30 years ago, Steve, right? And going to sales was not really normal. I have a master in economics and everyone was saying that I had to go to a bank. I got an offer from a bank, but I wanted to go sales. Just as a side effect, my dad was in procurement. I like my dad, but I thought, hey, if he's in procurement, I'm going to selling. And I think that's a career step that defined that, right? 30 years ago, I did it by myself. And I asked him as well, where should I go to get my first job and to learn a lot? He accepted Xerox. And luckily, I ended up in Xerox for a couple of years. That's number one. The second one is basically when I took the move to PTC. Everyone knows now PTC from the MedPick and John McMahon and everything. But at that moment in time, it was not clear to do that move because it was a bit of a risk. It was out there. It was like a very tough culture and it was rough. But it was my best move ever because if you go to a company where you can learn a lot, where they teach you really about MedPick, where they teach you about forecasting, where they teach you about hiring, recruitment, and all of the basic fundamentals that you need for your future career, that was basically awesome. And then the fact that I actually closed on one of the largest deals in Belgium allows me to be a manager. And then from there, actually, I think I had 4 promotions in 5 years' time.
Wow.
I guess that moment when I took the chance to go there and prove myself, that defines career. And I think for the people listening to those podcasts, I think it's going to be super important when you're young to pick the right company and the right leader that you want to work for, because in my case, it defines my career.
Do you feel that was more of you sounded like you were dealing with a whole lot of challenge. Like you said, it was tough. And now, so
I like
there's
that.
a difference between, yeah, I understand. And I love that. Like you love a challenge. And so there's leaning into a challenge. And it sounded like you had some headwinds, but did you also have a strong manager support, or was it you going to have to prove yourself kind of mindset? Because both can be good, both can be challenging.
No, I mean, once you were in PTC, it was, if you worked very hard, they teach you, they coach you, they trained you. It was an awesome school. And
Cool.
At the end of the day, then you go into the first line leadership, right? You go from being one of them to now someone that needs to manage them. And I think that also was like very much training education on how to do that. The school was just awesome. And of course, what was called tough is because the environment was, you have to make your numbers. You had to stand up. To give you an idea, I think we had 60 modules. We were selling CAD/CAM and the price was about $20,000. And I think that AutoCAD was like $1,000. So it was a pretty big value sale. But we also had 60 or 70 modules on top. And I tell you, everyone in the company needed to learn those modules. What are the 3 advantages, and give me a metric, and then basically give me then 2 customer use cases. And I can tell you, every single meeting internally, you had cards, and if they picked your cards, it doesn't matter that you were a VP or a sales, you have to go in front and say,
Wow,
okay,
that I
here what
love
it is.
that.
Yeah.
I tell you, you learn a lot. And again, this was for me perfect. I love that culture, and it definitely, of course, defined who I am right now.
Love
Okay.
it. Love it.
So let me ask you a question. When in your last conversation, you said that when you took over Netherlands at EMC, both employee and customer satisfaction were really low, right? You said below 30%. So the question is, what was your first leadership move, and what did that crisis teach you about really rebuilding morale, trust, and execution?
It was definitely broken, right? But think about it. I was 33 years old and I come in there, and I don't know that I mentioned that to you, but I was a 6 country managers in a year and a half time. So my first meeting that I did, I gave everyone a T-shirt with number 6 on, and I said, at least, if I leave, you have a present. But looking back, I think what it teaches me is that you need to make sure that you build trust from your employees and also for your customers. And how you do that is basically to take actions. And I can tell you, the first months I was always the first in the office, the last one leaving the office, and you have to show that. Secondly, it's also about engagement. I learned that employees, when they are engaged, they are getting better. It was very obvious that there were no winning culture anymore. And so you have to get the winning culture back into the motion. And then 3, a relentless focus on your customers and your partners in order to change. And there was a lot of effort that we put in, and also hiring different kind of people to balance a little bit of the people who were down with some new blood, allowing them to change the culture, because I also think that culture is something that is very important to me. And I give you one single anecdote, and there are many, but I think it was my second quarter, and my first quarter was not too good because, of course, it was 2001 and a lot of customers' data centers collapsed and they couldn't pay the bill. So it was not really a fun time.
Okay.
But the second quarter was a little bit better. And one of the things that I did is I sent cakes. And remember, my partners were not really thinking that we could be successful at that time. So I sent them cakes with a note on and said, hey, thank you for a great quarter. We did it, which was not true. But anyway, we sent the cakes out. And I went down to the sales teams and everyone, and I said, listen, and I said, I just sent the cakes out. And guess what? And really, honestly, I got all phone calls from all of those partners congratulating me. And they wanted to sit down with me on creating business plans. And I told everyone, keep your mind right now that when you go out, say that we're winning, because at the end of the day, customers want to buy from people who are winning. Partners want to be with people who are winning. So I think that was like a little bit of a milestone shift. And the third quarter, we did really well. And again, I think it was a very hard year in a ways, but I don't think I got so much back to Steve and Jay from folks, because they were not motivated in the beginning of the journey, and they were, after a year, very motivated. I had spouses coming to me at the end of the year with Christmas party to say, thank you, because we're back happy again. And what is more rewarding than that? Not a quarter. That is more rewarding. So it was a great journey, and I'm still thankful for the team over there.
I love that. There's just the idea that the relentless optimistic pursuit, helping everyone all the way home. Because taking it home, you always take your work home, whether you say you do or not.
You always take your work home, Steve, right? I think that's why. And again, people want to be winning. Of course, there's also a process to it, right? It's not, hey, everyone happy and we're now going to go. We took, of course, the discipline from PTC. We took that with us. We also wanted to make sure that we were focused on the execution that I think we need to do. But we also created a vision so that everyone can look at the vision on where we want to go. And again, it turned out to be good. And as I said, that coming back, EMC was probably one of my most great companies that I work with there as well. I ended up being global leader of the channels in Boston. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that they gave me.
Yeah, if I paraphrase it, the 3 things that you really said was building the trust and through actions. That's, I think, what you did with your team. Second was definitely improving the employee engagement and, of course, restoring that winning culture, which they had actually lost. And third, I think very important lesson you taught me really today is having that relentless focus on customers and partners, right? And
100%.
telling them that thank you for at least making me survive. If not a great quarter, but at least making me survive. I think great strategies, I believe, they stand anywhere in this world, right? They are like timeless. It doesn't matter whether it's AI-driven world today, or it was a human-driven world yesterday. But great points. Thank you for sharing that.
100%, Jay, 100%. We're still, no matter what, we're still human beings, right? So
Absolutely. AI is just a tool, right? It's just a software tool. People get a little overwhelmed with it, and we'll jump into those questions. We do have certain more into it.
Yeah, but before I want to ask you, you mentioned Boston. Now, you said you avoided going into what I think is the best phrase, the PowerPoint palace. It says everything in 2 words. It's amazing. You did that so you could stay close to the field. So how did the staying in the trenches, closer to customers and your teams, influence how you lead now as a CRO in scaling go-to-market organization?
I always think that when you are, no matter what kind of organization you lead and how big it is, right? Knowing what really lives with the people, with the employees, but also what lives with the customer, and getting that direct feedback is just priceless, because it basically makes you aware about what's going on, and you can take it back to the executives and you say, okay, this is what's going on and we need to act upon it, because otherwise you're too late. And for me, that is just super important. I see so many people that are not involving either the field or not involving feedback from customers, and think that they can actually define a plan or a program without talking to them. And I'm like, okay, how do you know that this is going to be successful if you didn't test it?
Did you ask anyone?
Yeah. But the second one as well, and you should not underestimate that. Again, I think our role as executive is to help people to be more successful. And so being with them and also coaching them and making sure that they actually grow in their career is, again, one of the most satisfying things that you can do. So it's a balance, but I think being with the customers and being with the partners and being with the employees is someone that every executive needs to do no matter what. And it's always, of course, a balance. But just sitting in headquarters, and it's never been me. There might be people who do that, but it's not who I am. And quite frankly, I also like to be out and speak with the people and with the customers, because at the end of the day, it's the customers that actually pay our bill, and we need to have full respect for them and be there with them.
Yeah, and I honestly, I really relate to that, because I come from a hardcore technology background, and I'm a person who leads from the front. So sometimes even the customers ask, so being a CEO, you're involved at this level in a project. But that's, again, as you said, that's who I am. I want to understand the customer problem. I want to really make sure we are giving them the right advice. And especially with some of the big customers, I tend to remain connected to them on ground.
Jay, don't forget, right? If they see that you're giving an extra mile and you're doing it, it's easier for them to also to do it, right? And to go an extra mile. It's just the way it is. Again, I think from my perspective, and at that moment in time, I was running global channels. You need to understand what is living, not only from a rep perspective, from a customer perspective, but also from a partner perspective, to say, okay, if you want to make a new program, how does it need to be look like? And so the only way you can do it is get feedback, so that when you come out, people say, yes, he listened to me on this one, or the team listened to me, and this makes sense.
Okay. I wanted to jump into, and as an entrepreneur, this actually excites me a lot and connects me a lot, that to your 2015 experience, where you actually placed a bet on edge cloud and blockchain back in 2015. So talk to us about that experience. How was your startup experience, and how did you really evaluate the market signals, market timing, and what were the learnings?
You don't do something just like that, right? For us, I mean, for that perspective, one, we met already an entrepreneur who did that before. That's number one. And secondly, you validate the market economic sense. Because I was also CEO from, a president, we had also had Bell Labs, who did the investigation. And I asked him a simple question: how is data explosion going to be in the next couple of years versus bandwidth growth? Now, bandwidth is pretty stable. You can't grow that too much. And think about, this is 2015, right? The data at that moment in time was growing exponentially. So it was a very logical thing to see, okay, how can you create like an edge cloud? And can you also then protect it to the blockchain? That was a logical idea that we had. And this is what we have been pushing now. Looking back, I think the reality is sometimes you can also be too early. And sometimes to be early is also not that good, because now everyone is edge cloud and everyone has been talking about it. But it was a great experience to be an entrepreneur and to drive that out. But the learning is, I think you need to make sure that you're not looking at the future, but you also need to make sure that the market is ready for what you want to bring. And at that moment in time, it was full about the global data centers and stuff like that. And everyone was investing in that area. And we were just a little bit early, but the good news is that the team is still there and the team is doing well. I'm happy that they are progressing. And I think with everything going on, I think they're in a good spot right now. So sometimes markets or sometimes conditions need to change in order to be successful. But the idea was at least very clear. And I think every startup that you want to do, you need to make sure that A, you understand your ICP very clearly, and B, is there a market fit? 3, is the market also ready for you? I think that that's something important.
2 things. Yeah, I was going to ask you that how has that experience shaped your bets on innovation? Because right now it is such a fluid market. We don't know where the AI is going, where I should bet, what I should do. So tell me from an AI perspective, that experience, how would you now do some bets on new innovation? And
well, at this moment in time, I'm working for VectraAI, as you think, but VectraAI existed as an AI company already like X amount of years. So meaning selecting a company was also very clearly based upon where the future would go. And I think everyone out there should select a company. 1, is the market that you're in growing? Now, again, cybersecurity, unfortunately, is growing tremendously. 2, is the technology that the company has, and again, it was a very much an AI-driven technology at that time, is that something that is sustainable for the future? And can you be the key leader when you join? And that is clearly the case. And 3, who are the people that you work with and for? And again, I'm very lucky and that I can work with some key leaders with Vectra. And that's for me the 3 decisions. So looking back at my startup and then going into Vectra, it was a conscious choice going on Vectra because of also the technology advantage that they had based upon their AI models.
Interesting. And I think that I read this article years ago in one of these, this was like Fast 50 company or something years ago, that talked about the benefits of going last, like being the last into a market to let everyone else make all the mistakes. But at the same time, if you can survive at the front, you have the opportunity to win or consistently win because you're already running, even though you end up piling on some mistakes. So it's interesting, like there's benefits to both, but there's, you're thinking through it. It's like, it's great that you've figured out how to stay in the game, even though the market hadn't come towards you. It's almost like you position, if you can hold on long enough, the market will absorb the knowledge.
Well, again, as long as if you solve a critical problem from the customer, right? As long you can solve a problem and there's a pain, then you're good. If that's gone, then you have an issue. But again, sometimes markets are coming to you and sometimes you need to have a little bit of push. We have, I think in the next couple of weeks, Gartner is coming out with the magic quadrant on what we do. So I think that was not the case 5 years ago when I joined. Now they're coming out and saying, hey, which basically gives you a credibility in that regards that the market opportunity is real, which we know and our 1,500 customers already knew, but it helps you in order to make sure that you drive even more market share moving forward, Steve, right? But as any company who solves a pain and can execute accordingly will win, no matter when you start.
Perfect.
Hey, you've also, aside from being an early adopter of some cool technology, you've scaled complex partner ecosystems across some continents, which is not an easy thing to do. So let me ask you though, when you're deciding around bringing in a partner or using a third-party product or building in-house, when you're actually thinking about that in how you advance what your team offers, what Vectra offers, what kind of criteria guides that decision on in-house versus partner versus third party?
Yeah, it's probably more engineering, but from where I'm sitting, right, the way I look upon it is, I think there's a couple of criteria. What is your strategic value, right? And number 1, what is the speed? 3, is it scalable? And then 4, do you have the talent and the resources, right? So if you have something like where your IP is from strategic value, if you develop that, you're going to do it in-house. There's no doubt about it. But at the same token, if it's less strategic value, but someone else can give you the speed, then probably are more looking at the outside to say, okay, that makes more sense for me to take it on board.
Take it up.
Three, do you have enough talent? Sometimes if you don't have the talent, so if you have to hire the people and scale them on the resource and you don't have them, then it's sometimes better to create a partnership or an ecosystem that allows you. And then these are, I think, the typical, I would say, the things that you look for, Steve. But again, I think your question is, in my opinion, from the engineering side, less from the go-to-market side. But yeah, that's the way I would look at it right now.
From a market side, you're influencing the approach of what technology teams should be doing. Like, I'm sure as a CRO, you're like, look, that's great. You want to spend all these months building this thing, but if we miss the boat, or if somebody else does this, or if we don't use a partner, I need this up in 3 months. I don't need it.
Sure. So, but again, I think the decisions will be looked upon, as I said, you look at those 4 criteria. That being said, from a go-to-market perspective, you sometimes can look at a market segment where you know that if you bundle your solution with someone else,
sure,
you basically solve a problem. As an example, 2 weeks ago, we announced, for example, with CrowdStrike, a bundle for SME where we joined forces, and because it's pretty clear that if you do that, there's a need for SMEs to take the best of breed products, which they normally can't afford. And so we bundled our resources, technology together, packaged it in, selected some MSSPs and routes to market, and they will then go and drive that business for us, which is probably something that we would not capture otherwise. That's more on the go-to-market side, right? When you start looking at that. And this is where I think tech alliances are super important, right? Because at the end of the day, you look at the market and who is really your competitor, but you need to look not only at your current competitor, you also need to look at the larger companies and see what they're doing, and how can you then basically partner with someone else to basically create better solutions. Because at the end of the day, customers, they want to have a solution, and they want to know that if I take the best of breed, are they working together so I can rely on them? So, for example, creating that bundle for that mid-market is a huge opportunity for the SMEs to take advantage of that.
Okay. Can I turn that a little more inward? You gave me a great example under the product design, right? Like, how do we align a product with CrowdStrike or something like that? When you're making technology decisions, being platforms your sales teams use or other infrastructure tools that you're using to help you understand go-to-market, is there any other process that you ensure for the teams you're managing to make sure that you're serving both that speed and the strategic value?
When I buy tools, right, then I first need to think, okay, will it help me to grow my revenue? That's number one criteria, speed.
Sure.
And underneath that, I'm thinking like, okay, will it help to make my sales rep more productive or to help him to achieve? So I think from my perspective where I'm sitting, like, okay, will it achieve my revenue goals? 2, will it increase my productivity for my reps or for my employees? These would be, for me, from a go-to-market perspective, the 2 biggest criteria. Or 3rd, are there any AI tools which allows me to pick up signals that customers want to buy quicker than others? Because think about it, you're going from a seller-centric to a buyer-centric world these days. So what are the tools that allows me to pick up those signals where the buyer intent is better than not? And that's something that, let's be honest, we would not think about that before COVID. It's pretty clear that it's very obvious right now.
Yeah, we all like to do our own research now before we get to a conversation with a salesperson.
That's exactly.
If you can pick up a lot of self-service and get a few people to buy a few things, you're way farther down the path.
That's exactly. I think the whole buyer behavior has been fundamentally changed, right? The way you do selling is also different.
You were just going into my next thought, which I wanted to ask you. As a CRO, grown and scaled so many organizations, the current traditional sales model that we had, is definitely under strain. Buyers are skeptical, they are hard to reach, especially after COVID. So my question is, how has been your go-to-market strategy evolved in last few years to adopt to these changes, and what tactics and mindsets that are really non-negotiable in this new reality? And how would you advise as a CRO, saying that this should be the framework of go-to-market in this new world?
Yeah, again, it depends on which product you're selling. Enterprise product-led growth, of course, but I look at it from our perspective, Jay and Steve. As I said, you go, and I 100% agree, things have changed. You can't get access to CIO is that easy. So you need to make sure that you go from a seller to a buyer-centric motion. And one of the things that is non-negotiable, and that's not an easy journey depending on where you are, is your ICP. You need to stick to your ICP. You need to make sure that you have a clear focus on your ideal customer profile, and you need to stick to that. The second thing, and then there's more marketing tools that will help you to drive buyer intent and stuff like that. So I'm not going to talk about that. But for me, the second big thing is how can you create leverage in your model? In the past, it was like you add another rep and you add another rep and stuff like that. Those days are over. For me, they were already over, but it's now definitely over because you need to look at costs. You need to have like buying cycles are longer. And so for me, the way I think about it, and the company is thinking about how can I create leverage? And so leverage for me in my world is how can I scale out with my partners, right? And I think my partners are my reseller distributors, my alliances, but also my managed service providers. And one of the big bets we have done is focus very hard on the managed services providers. Our product is very suitable to be an add-on and be a complement in their overall SOC to provide better services. And so relentlessly, if you make that choice, you need to make sure that you go after it and that the whole company is behind it, including marketing, product management, and stuff like that to drive that growth. Because again, if they have 100 customers, they know those customers. I can leverage their services to get to their customers. So leverage is a huge component, and any company who doesn't create leverage will have a tough time. Two, leverage is also with your own customers. We all forget that, sometimes we as well, but we need to leverage our customers way more because the customers are the biggest advocates. They know what the ROI is from our product, and they need to be able to advocate to other customers on social media, but we also need to ask them, hey, do you know other CISO or CIO? And so from my perspective is, yes, you go completely to an ICP, you change the way you use your tools with AI and your marketing, and make sure that you pick up more singles, more digital, right? Because digital is key. And then second thing is how can you create leverage in your model so that you are more efficient first on reaching the customers, but also your chances to convert them are way higher as well. At a lower cost.
Lower
That's
cost,
where
of
it
course.
goes.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you, just looking back, what is the one piece of advice that you would give other CXOs or others trying to navigate both into scale or into the role and to be able to manage change or reinvent in today's landscape?
Yeah, it's not an easy one, Steve, but I always think that you can only scale with people. You need to lead with focus and adapt with humility. So scaling with people, you need to understand that people are key for any organization. You can have the great strategy, but if you don't have the people that are engaged and willing to execute for you and with you and believe in your vision, then strategy is nothing. So you need to make sure that you hire the best and you retain them. That's number one. Two, focus. I think in this market, more and more, and it's something that I also picked up the last couple of years after COVID, you need to focus on really what matters and not think about the things that there's so much confusion, so much other things in the market. Just stick with your focus and do that 100%, and the company should be 100% behind that. And three, it's adapt with humility. And this is why I'm saying, coming back to, when I was saying I have to go to meet people and stuff like that, everyone needs to learn. You need to listen. In my job, you need to listen to the market, to other peers, but also to people. And you should not be afraid to change because of your ego. You need to do it because of the fact that it's right for the business. And you know what, as an example, I think in December, I interviewed all of my reps because I wanted to know what worked, what didn't work. So when we go into the next new year and you do the kickoff, you say, okay, here's what I heard, here's what we're going to do about it, and then you can adapt accordingly. Again, there's such amount of wisdom in the organization, and making sure that you adapt accordingly without too much ego, I think is a key thing, in my opinion, for every CRO. And when you do that, then you need to make sure you execute and make sure everyone is behind it.
That's excellent. I think that kind of wraps back to the first thing you said that worked really well for you at PTC was this ruthless attention to the fundamentals. And the same approach coming back to, I need to talk to the customer, I need to talk to the sales team. and I need to stay close to them and keep them going on the fundamentals as well as understanding what they need right now so that you can be adaptable to succeed as a CRO. And I think that's pretty interesting kind of a thread that I'm seeing over you is that the fundamentals, but the people are part of that fundamental. And that's a really cool thing.
It's very simple, Steve, right? I think every manager, every leader should ask the question, if I go somewhere else, will people follow me, yes or no? And I've seen too many people that, on board, and then suddenly there's not a lot of people following that particular leader, then you miss something. And so again, it comes back to those fundamental things. It's not about you, it's also about them and creating that vision that you all want to work for. So I think culture is a big thing. It's not only for me, I think it's also for Vectra. And I think it's not easy when you scale to make sure that the culture is still there. So that's why making sure we always hire the right people that can protect that culture is super, super important for us and for our customers, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to ask you this is looking back, what one piece of advice would you give to other CXOs, especially who are navigating scale, change, or innovation in this today's whole volatile landscape?
I just mentioned it, right? That's the lead with focus, adapt with humility, and then basically scale with people. But the other thing is also try to learn, right? Listen. I think that's the big word. And listen to your board, listen to other people who has done it before, listen to your customers, but also listen to other peers. Try to navigate, but also I think that's the one thing, Jay and Steve. I think it's not an easy market out. The market for CROs is also very volatile. It's not about making a quarter, it's about building a business and stick with that. And so you need to make sure that you stick with that vision, that you're able to articulate that vision, and that you can also adapt accordingly when something goes wrong, because there will always be something that goes wrong, but just stick with your fundamentals.
Thank you. Spot on. I think one thing that has seriously stuck with me is it's not about getting it done, it's about building the business, right? And very important attitude change of how you approach.
I think at least from a Vectra perspective, listen, every customer is very important, right? Because we want to build a business. We're not in the short term. Yes, of course, quarters are important, but if you build a business, then the results of the quarters will follow themselves if you do it right, if your fundamentals are right. It's I've seen sometimes in the markets that very short, narrow focus, and I think that's okay. You need to have that, but you need to balance that with a longer term vision as well to make sure that you have your strategy.
Okay, thank you, William. I think we can sit here, talk to you the whole day. We've already spoken a lot. Thank you so much for your insights into it. Any last thoughts before we?
No, listen, again, thank you for having me. I think this is great. At the end of the day, I think from my perspective as well, I listen to the webcast as well. As I said, it's part of sometimes learning. And if I pick something up, sometimes I ping the person to have a chat, because again, we're all on the same boat. We need to make sure that we help each other in this environment and to become better people as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.